Former President Donald Trump's historic second impeachment trial will begin in the Senate. He faces a single charge of incitement of insurrection in a speech to his supporters ahead of a deadly riot at the U.S. Capitol in January. Now, Trump's legal team has called the trial absurd and unconstitutional on the basis that he has already left office. Associate Professor at Howard University, Dr. Krista Johnson, joins me now with more from Washington. Good evening, and thank you so much for your time, Dr. Johnson. Firstly, are there matters of constitutionality that are set to arise during this trial, and whether, in fact, the fact that it's going ahead in and of itself might be a constitutional problem?
That's taken up a lot of the news lately, and I think there are probably debates to be had on both sides, but the majority of legal scholars have weighed in and agree that this is really a political process and not a legal process. And there's constitutional precedent, there's historical precedent for trying office holders, political office holders, once they have left office. And I think that it's pretty clear from most people's perspective that that is actually accommodated by in the Constitution.
When one looks at the options here, the main objective, at least of the Democrats, is to try and ensure that Donald Trump never has an opportunity to run for office again. On one hand, yes, it's to hold him accountable, but to ensure he never runs for office again. Are there alternative ways of getting to that outcome without this impeachment trial?
Well, there could be. In fact, it's interesting. I think two of the senators, I think it was actually a Republican and Democratic senator, tried to pass a censure motion that would, in fact, do that. So there are other ways, political ways, in which Congress could try and hold the former president accountable. This is the impeachment process is the process that is really spelled out in the Constitution. So I think it probably is appropriate, certainly for the Democrats, to pursue this. It's also probably, to be honest, in the interest of the Republicans to pursue this track, and to also ensure that Donald Trump is not allowed to hold public office in the future. The outcome of this impeachment is really, I think, going to have more consequences for the Republican Party and for Republican politicians going forward than for the Democrats.
Why is this process so important?
It's important, really, for a number of reasons. As you, I think, alluded to in the previous segment, the expectation is that Donald Trump is going to be acquitted because there simply are not enough votes on the Republican side to charge him with this offense of inciting an insurrection. But it is important for accountability to go through with this process, and to also lay out a historical record, which will be historical record. I think for many Americans, to be honest, I mean, many of us have seen the scenes that you're showing on the TV now, but many Americans probably for the first time will hear the precise words that the former president made at that speech on January 6th, inciting the insurrection that particular day, but also a number of other evidence. And I think that the House manager's opportunity and really ability to lay out a strong case and to put forward all of the evidence into the historical record, into the permanent record, is very important.
What process is this likely to follow, Dr. Johnson?
So I think it's probably, it's in everybody's interest to have a relatively quick trial. So I don't imagine that this is going to take much more than a week, because the Democrats certainly do want to get down to the business of passing a COVID relief bill and other items that are very much on their agenda. So it'll be a short process. As I think you had the Senate Majority Leader speaking before, the House managers are the ones who will bring the case to the Senate on behalf of the people, and they will be allowed to present evidence. It's not clear now whether or not they're going to call witnesses. They have actually requested that the former President Trump appear and to give testimony. He has declined that. So it's not clear if one needs any other additional testimony. The lawyers and the defense on behalf of the former President Trump will then have an opportunity to make their rebuttal. As I mentioned before, I think it's unfortunate because impeachment is a political process, and yet it's playing out in many ways as kind of a legal issue. We're using legal terms such as incitement, of an insurrection, which connote all kinds of legal definitions, which really should not apply in the context of the political arena. And it harkens back to really a lot of the shenanigans that have gotten the former President Trump out of trouble in the past. With the first impeachment trial, the kind of legal wranglings that the Republicans made at that time was to try and latch onto this idea of, well, was this a quid pro quo, right? The conversation that the president had with the Ukrainian president. Was he really asking for a quid pro quo? And in a legal context, that has a very specific definition, right? And a very specific requirement in terms of meeting that bar. But this isn't a legal forum, right? We all know that from a political perspective and in terms of ensuring the sanctity of our democratic institutions, we cannot have politicians who claim that elections were fraudulent when they were not, that claim that there was, tremendous amounts of fraud and vote rigging, that call on states to try and change their votes and the outcomes of the elections. That's simply untenable in the political system. And so for all of those reasons, the former President Trump really needs to be held accountable and needs to be impeached.
Dr. Johnson, what is the possibility of a second acquittal? This is for the former President Donald Trump. What does that do? Do you think that it may embolden him, especially given the fact that he has made it clear that the possibility of running for office again is certainly on the agenda for him?
I'm afraid that it will. I really think that in many ways it's the Republican Party that is in more of a really tough situation. Sorry, at the moment. I hope you can see me. In a really tough situation because for the past several weeks, Donald Trump has been rather quiet, really trying to kind of get this impeachment trial behind him and trying to make sure that he doesn't ruffle any more feathers. But I think once you see this done, you're going to see him come out with all of his bellicose rhetoric again. And that's really going to put Republicans in a really difficult position, trying to, kind of navigate away from Trump and yet still very much beholden to his base.
But do you believe that there are lessons that the U.S. has learned, that its institutions have learned out of the Trump administration that perhaps will create better safeguards in future, especially given the fact that you had a president who was speaking and behaving in a way that the world had never really seen before?
Yeah, I think that it's really hard to say, right? Because there are many politicians which don't seem to be acting as though there were any lessons learned at all. In fact, seem to be kind of recreating, history and suggesting that, well, maybe Nancy Pelosi was somehow responsible for January 6th. So it's really the kind of the incantations coming from some of the political politicians or leaders at the moment are really problematic. But I would say, what is also important to note is that there are a number of pieces of legislation in Congress now, which I think will pass and hopefully will pass with some bipartisan support, which are specifically targeted to address these kinds of problems. Our democratic system and institutions in the past we are recognized now. We're very much reliant on really kind of democratic norms and people just doing the right thing. And so I think we certainly have learned that lesson. And there are several bills in Congress now, which I think we will see pass into law, which will make it far more difficult for politicians at the presidential level, but all the way down to use their political office for personal gain. We have things like the Hatch Act, but that obviously, was clearly not enough to restrain this president. So I think that is also taking place, and perhaps that isn't getting as much news or coverage internationally, but that's certainly, I think, what is going to be more significant and more consequential moving forward than this impeachment trial.
Dr. Krista Johnson, thank you for your time tonight. She's an associate professor at Howard University in Washington, D.C.